Okay, cool. So for those of you who've not been to a forum session, the concept here is basically we have a topic. We have an Etherpad. It's an open-ended discussion. And I proposed this session, finding forward direction on project security or improving project security. I guess about 2 months ago, in the middle of this, I was working 2 CVEs. And this has been on the top of my mind since February was Murano. Jeremy is shaking his head yes. And for those of you who are not aware, Murano was a not the community's finest hour. Long story short is Murano was a dashboard component that was designed to source data from the foundation website to create an application catalog. And the reality was that the data hadn't been published or available since 2017.
Yeah.
So Murano should not have been a project. But we incentivize in the community to create projects and have things and steward things, and that's good. But we all need to take a step back at times and look at why are we doing things, and then we also need to respond to issues. And what happened with Murano specifically was the project leader basically went silent, disappeared on us when a CVE was reported against the Murano component. And this is the only time that a component has been kicked out of OpenStack due to a CVE. And I think it was immediate deprecation and removal. Isn't that really?
It was already inactive and wasn't being included in the release, but we basically made an announcement. Strongly recommend that everyone remove it from their deployments.
And it turned out, I think one operator had used it and had some custom catalog stuff that they had built, but really it requires people interacting in the community. So the purpose of the session is largely see what concerns we have, what common direction we can kind of find. And so I put some context in the Etherpad to try and find the discussion. Here we've also seen some other CVEs. For those of you who are not aware, there was CVE filed against Nova, Glance, and Cinder. And turns out there was that same issue in Ironic. And it has to do with QEMU and image conversion. That was a fun one. If you haven't patched, go patch. Just leave it at that. While working on that issue, we found an issue in Ironic. Fairly mild by comparison. Still something we want to get fixed. And the reality looking back is these items were huge time sinks. I traveled, went for business during time from January, not January, July, beginning in July when I found out about the Nova issue until last week when I pushed the second CVE patches, or week before last. And my time was basically 90% consumed with this. And if you think about a team of contributors working together on a CVE embargoed issue, you're probably basically losing a 2 to 3 whole contributors while a team is working a CVE. Because you not only have to fix the issue in master, then you have to start backporting it. Depending on the project, you may have additional branches. In Ironic's case, we have 12 branches that we have to backport against. That's before we even get to downstream product that I have at Red Hat that I have to patch that stuff too. So you can imagine this stuff becomes a huge time sink. And really, for projects to have a good security posture, they need to clear their bugs, need to respond to security issues, and they need to have enough capacity in terms of maintainers upstream so that they can work issues. And this doesn't necessarily mean that it's just developers. You really need operator folks and look at something and go, I can reproduce this. I see exactly what's going on. Right now, it's just developers. That really makes it harder because then we have to go reproduce in different ways and do a whole bunch of other work. So really the challenge that we have in front of us is we have to keep things appropriately scoped, keep things appropriately minded. And, sometimes we're forgetting about things. A perfect example was recently Keystone had an issue that went public. Turned out that the entire team that was on the list to review those items wasn't active.
The silver lining to that story is luckily it was not a bug.
Yes.
Someone made a mistake in their environment and thought they were seeing a problem that was actually working as intended. So
Yes. Thank you for the silver lining there. And that was a great silver lining to see. It was not great to see the message, oh, we're posting this because the timeout expired. What? And at the same time, we also need teams to actively work on improving product security, or project security, I should say. So teams have to have that capacity and that willingness to move stuff forward. And a really good example of that is something like library that everyone uses for SSH, Python. What? Paramiko, thank you. If we could eliminate Paramiko tomorrow, I'd be all for it. And all sorts of stuff. And there are reasons to get rid of it. I realize only about half the community actually cares about it. The other half have to comply with things like FIPS 140 standards, but we do. So in the board level, we've had this discussion repeatedly, and discussion is kind of fractured in two different directions, where we have the Open Regulatory Compliance Working Group, which is a multi-foundation effort, is kind of trying to move towards what does the regulatory requirements and ecosystem look like? Because what we're also seeing as leaders in larger communities is we're seeing many governments be regulating these open source communities. Obviously, that's going to impact us. Be more process, more requirements, reporting. So that's one thing we have to keep in mind is as open source moves forward, there's going to be more of a tax. I hate to use the word tax, but it's going to be a tax on resources on the regulatory side of things. We have to manage that. And then, in terms of like stewarding and having requirements of what the board of directors expects, the discussions have kind of loosely navigated around. Each team probably needs 3 to 5 people that can actively work these things. That's the problem. Those core teams are 3 to 5 people. So we obviously need to find a forward path. So thoughts, perceptions, questions, concerns. I'll take concerns. We should start with concerns. This is where everyone else gets to speak up to the super mics.
Not a concern, but something to add in here because you mentioned the Keystone and it was sent out publicly and so on and so forth. Read the discussed mailing list. If you see something, reply to it. Don't just assume someone else will get to it. But if you see something, reply to them, ask them more questions because that might also help with security for something to be found a little quicker.
We have had a couple people email the mailing list this year with stuff that is borderline CVE that should have been filed as a bug as well. And that's probably more of an awareness issue.
Yeah, they may not know they should have filed a bug.
Yeah.
So as a bit of post-mortem in the Keystone situation, what was going on there was the group of project maintainers or reviewers who the vulnerability management team was expected to reach out to get confirmation on Keystone bugs was full of people who were no longer working on Keystone. And not only that, but the current PTL did not even have access to change who was in that group because the transition that normally takes place from PTL to PTL as they rotate out did not include handing off access to maintain that list of individuals.
And Keystone also went through a stage where it was DPL.
in theory meant that there was a designated security liaison. Because that's required by DPL governance model.
I'm just
Also
saying
with
that as
Never,
where that transition didn't happen, is when it went into DPL and then came out of DPL. And for anyone who doesn't know what DPL is, it's a distributed leadership. So it's not just one PTL, it'll be 2, 3 people usually that can help run the project.
with specific required roles like release management, vulnerability management liaison, infrastructure liaison, that sort of thing.
So I see some people have put some notes in. And obviously we do need bugs to be triaged by contributors. We probably need a prot to ensure there's processes in place. Thoughts?
I think one thing we didn't do is probably put security in the front and center with project structures and stuff like that. I mean, it's there. The PTLs know that has to be done, but it's probably not at the top of their priorities right now. So bubbling that back up might help.
I think it needs to be like in the top 5 things. Personally, because my concern is negative press. My concern is also, I don't want to open up the news. I'm thinking of a newspaper, but when's the last time I touched a newspaper? Look at a newspaper and go, oh, they got hacked. Oh no.
No, they run on us.
That's like my biggest fear. I think everyone who has an operations background probably has that fear.
Or has been through that.
Yes, it's not a fun experience.
Not fear, it's experience. Dread.
It is dread. So if we can say through the OpenStack TC, maybe pilot something where we put that more front and center aspect, I think that would be good. What I would like is if we can see some pattern that works, then kind of if we can replicate that across the other projects. Then again, OpenStack as a project has a much larger surface. So it's definitely the space where we need to focus at the same time.
While I selfishly would like to see an improvement around responsiveness of teams to reports of suspected vulnerabilities. Another thing that I threw up there was we've really not put a lot of priority on security-oriented improvements. The secure RBAC goal has been dragging out for a very long time at this point. The image encryption pop-up team has been trying for something like 5 years to get that feature added across the different projects that it touches. We started a migration from root wrap to PrivSep ages ago and have still not really completed that. We basically just moved a whole bunch of very insecure wrap rules into PrivSep and called it done enough. And so now we've got a bunch of very insecure PrivSep rules instead of insecure root wrap rules. So while PrivSep was supposed to give us the opportunity to tighten a lot of that up, that extra step was never then taken.
So is there an opportunity for community goals, maybe?
And 3 of the things that you said are active goals right now, but it's an ongoing thing.
And I think RBAC is, that feels like a one of those cases where we had a grand vision, reset to a lesser vision, and we're now heading back in the direction of the grand vision again. Rather amusing and frightening at the same time. And it's actually pretty massive. Speaking from experience, really easy to do in a project like Ironic, where, oh, it's pretty simple. Everyone's an admin. We can just do all the work.
From a tying things together perspective, like focusing on sorts of improvements do also help the overall security posture of the projects and lessen the impact of vulnerabilities as they're discovered. I mean, with secure RBAC in place, well, users may not have the permissions necessary to exploit certain authenticated vulnerabilities that get reported, or with image encryption in place. If we have leaks in Glance, well, you know, people who were encrypting their images may very well be immune to any sort of fallout from that. But the PrivSet migration, if we wind up with execution style bugs in projects, then what things can be executed by those services intentionally or maliciously could be limited by the PrivSet rules that are in place, that sort of thing.
So I think there's another aspect to this, which is if we can increase the amount of reviewer activity. I know with one of the second CVE I work with here, honestly, if we just had a couple more people asking questions, we would have spotted it before the issue ever emerged. We've gone, oh yeah, we need to do that. And pay the price.
That was a tough situation all around because risk one was severe enough that really did need to work on it in private and control who had access to information about it. So we had to strike a balance between telling all the teams about this and trying to figure out which projects might have been impacted. And I do think that ironic getting overlooked a pretty significant oversight.
Talking about the first CVE.
Well, the first three combined.
Yes.
So that, and really that was an extension of vulnerabilities that we worked through in 2023 as well.
Oh, yeah.
But the other challenge with it was that it straddled not just OpenStack community, but also the QEMU community. And we had different priorities and different viewpoints on what was a vulnerability and where. And it was one group of people working privately on fixing a security issue in OpenStack and one group of people working privately on security issues in QEMU, and trying to figure out how to coordinate communication between those was painful. We ended up falling back on Red Hat employee whose feet straddled the line into both communities to sort of shuffle information back and forth, but things got lost, it didn't get communicated, and the lines got mismatched. It was a huge mess.
Absolutely, and that's just a testimony to the fact that working these issues is complex matter, and it is a resource tax for upstream communities. So, like on a product ownership hat, much more of a you have to plan for that. We're going to take those hits at times. All we do is roll with the punches, but we need to also try and strive to do better. So,
as an aside, for people unfamiliar with the intricate complexities of these processes, I've got a talk at 1:55 over in room 309 today that goes through a fair amount of these topics. So we don't have to rabbit hole too much on the process oriented stuff if people want to catch up that way.
So we have pitfalls. How can we fix all the pitfalls?
One idea that came to me is you said that you have people who just faded away, and they retain credentials, didn't do their assigned tasks because maybe they've got a different job or something. That seems like something that this system could do, right? Like if you haven't seen an input from somebody, maybe eventually you time them out and an alert to someone saying, hey, this person seems to be dead, not dead, sorry, inactive. You know what I mean? Though, like his role is.
I think the challenge is bug tracking right now is largely in Launchpad, and we don't really have tooling to do that. And if someone's just inactive in Launchpad, folks really can't see that.
And there's no direct tie between their Launchpad account and their accounts in other systems that we do have deeper insights into. So it's kind of hard to map those to each other to be able to say, well, we saw this person active over on the mailing lists or in code review or whatever. So they're probably.
And don't forget storyboard. Some projects are in storyboard, some of them are in Launchpad. two different systems for bugs.
We do actually have insight into the storyboard users that got, you know, a direct access to all of the backend data for that since we're running it. But
Could we just have a process that where ETL just has to acknowledge, yes, this has been looked at?
I think so. And the other aspect is these groups are not under any kind of supervision, but that the members of the group, right? Like supervision, I meant there is an OpenStack account on Launchpad that's not part of any of these groups. And so it involves a human component to go manage the membership and so on.
I mean, ideally, the PTL or the security liaison of a DPL project would be revisiting that list periodically with some frequency. And, you know, going, okay, I know this person is still active on my team and they're, you know, still a good person to be looking at security issues that are reported in private. And so I'll keep them on. This person's not active, I'm gonna take them out and get those lists refreshed and cleaned up continuously.
Which works, but I was thinking like not automating the thing, but taking control of something that's abandoned because people have moved. That might help. There's like the Keystone issue with 3 or 4 people in a group that we now need to track down and have them change the group memberships and stuff. But we'd rather have some OpenStack account that can also go do that.
Well, I mean, we do. So like what happened in that case was Dave Wild, who's the current PTL, he was like, okay, I realize we should have been keeping this up all along, but I don't have access to manage that group. And I, being a member of the OpenStack admins group in Launchpad, which is listed as the owner of the Keystone CoreSec group, was able to temporarily add myself to that group and then add him, set him as an administrator, and then take myself back out. And he had the ability to then go through and clean everything up. So we do still have, as long as the groups have been created correctly, and big caveat, because we find a lot of projects where they just sort of ad hoc created a group on Launchpad and never set the ownership to something that gives us that ability. And then in the future, you know, we get stuck and we have to get Launchpad admins involved, which can be a pretty lengthy delay in getting some of that stuff addressed. So
Makes sense. So going back to the process thing, that can be part now. So the PTL can, this thing, if there is a way to you know, get the group back, and the PTL can do this, or the
I
security.
mean, it already came up in the wake of the Keystone situation recently, and I think there was a change up to either add that to the PTL tasks in the project team guide, or
It's there, and it is in the top 3 things, but not revisited. We'll have to cycle.
We need like a checklist, someone has to keep the project going.
And it's something that the DC can check on.
If we can add something that is this is a guard. If this has not happened, this project cannot continue forward, because we do incentivize naturally through we want to grow and have all these projects, but at some point that's counterproductive to maintaining healthy projects. So if there's a project that's not being responsive or not doing the thing, then it's time for non-fun discussions.
I mean, luckily we were able to get that resolved in Keystone's case. In the Murano case earlier, you know, that was the other example of there was just nobody around to fix vulnerabilities that were reported. It wasn't simply people weren't paying attention or were busy with other things, but there was literally just nobody. There was one person who volunteered, and then as soon as the vulnerability report came to a head, they just sort of vanished. Did not really have time for that task after all, it turned.
The next pitfall is libraries we depend on with persistent security issues. This is really a people issue or interest or care or prioritization issue.
It's significant code refactoring in multiple projects.
Yeah.
To address those sorts of things.
I think part of it is also just finding a direction and not going, it's too big. I think right now, for Nico specifically, it's too big. I can't possibly do this. And
What are the current Paramiko concerns besides just the lack of FIPS compliance?
Clients uses an external library. That is not.
Compliance mode or whatever.
Yeah.
That transition from Launchpad to Storybook, whatever it is that all forever now?
Pretty much. Some projects chose just not to move, some projects moved, some projects were happy in storyboard, and project leadership changed and back.
There's ever been a specific requirement in OpenStack that teams use any one specific tool for defect tracking or for task management or project planning or any sort of like, and Storyboard and Launchpad both sort of straddle some of those items, but then some teams still rely on additional tools besides those for some of those things.
Some teams moved over, some teams didn't.
Some use things like Trello and other stuff to organize their tasks. It's varied.
Almost like we need to try and drive standardization, maybe. I think that's also a separate problem from this problem.
Yeah, I mean, from the VMT's perspective, Launchpad isn't really so much of an issue because we've got 30 teams created in both. We can triage issues in either one. They've both got their flaws as systems go, but both serviceable. So
And yet you said that Launchpad, you don't have visibility to activity of contributors.
we don't run Launchpad. Their staff are the ones who would have to get involved if we needed to get accessed. And there's a lot of things that, you know, from their perspective, they see as a privacy risk, and so are locked down API, not way available. Like one time they allowed lookup email addresses for all users, but then in the wake of GDPR, they shifted and all that aren't exposed and opt in explicitly, make your email address available, that sort of thing. So like a lot of things that we rely on like ceased working as the privacy posture for that service changed.
Also, with that change, there's also been churn there. At one time, I know we could message some folks in IRC, go, hey, I need this group access fixed. And they're like, I can get to it in a day or so. And in a day or so, it would be fixed. Now it's send an email and hope that they would respond.
It's been a while since I've done it. I think you open a bug on the Launchpad itself project and wait for the admins to act on it. Regardless, yeah, there was also a significant span of time entirely unmaintained, 3 or 4 years straight, where they just weren't even fixing problems that were coming up with it. So
So, out of full of hands, who cares about FIPS compliance here?
they have concerns insofar as that it's a policy of one specific government, and we're a global project, and there are like other countries with similar
Echo your
regulations.
concerns. I know there are some governments that go, that policy over there is acceptable for us as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like FIPS is not all that relevant in Europe. It's definitely not relevant in China or Russia. They've each got their own standards that a lot of cases don't trust standards that are by or promoted by United States NSA, effectively running NIST to some degree.
I think the last pitfall that we've got on here is don't know how to file security issue. I think this is much more awareness and maybe find information overload. No.
I mean, I'm not sure what else we, because every web page in the footer has a security link, goes to a page that as the security reporting instructions laid out in detail. And if they're not finding that, I mean, if they were finding it, but then like not sure how to follow it, that would be one thing. I think in some cases, people are just not.
Okay, well, it is. Any other questions, comments, concerns, thoughts, ideas? I think we have 10 minutes or so.
As part of the process, I know this is probably the next session that you have in 309 at 1:30, you said the VNT. How does that tie into the project team, you think? In either do and actually have this thing, this.
So as far as, I mean, one of the things that we have discussed, discussion as well, Julia, is having all of the OpenStack projects just be EMT blanket oversight. Currently, it's an opt-in thing because part of the process is that we want a small group of people initially to be aware of the vulnerability reports so that they can figure out if it's reported against the right project, because a lot of times, more often than you'd expect, we, don't really know if they run into a problem that straddles multiple different APIs where the actual issue is. Is it a Keystone problem or is it a Horizon problem? When they come into some sort of authentication related issue through Horizon, well, maybe it's just being passed through by Horizon. It's not really in Horizon, but they're reported against Horizon because that's what they were interacting with, right? And so you don't necessarily want to tell the Horizon core security reviewers about a Keystone vulnerability unless it's necessary that the Horizon team get involved in fixing that. So basically the defect trackers for the teams are set up in such a way that if they've got VMT oversight, then the VMT is the only group that has initial visibility other than the porter that has initial visibility into the bug that's reported. And then we look at it and we figure out which team or teams we should be adding the security review groups from at that point. I have a personal goal of that occurring within like 72 hours of reporting, but usually it happens less than 24 hours. The VMT member looks it over and then gets at least one other OpenStack team involved. Reliant on the responsiveness of those groups that are then curated by the details. So that's part of why it's an opt-in process, is that the defect tracker has to be set a certain way. The teams are giving up some control to the VMT in that situation. But the TC could certainly say, okay, we have ultimate governance over the individual project teams, think that it's in their best interest to just all be received by the VMT. That does take us into some issues, some resource issues of, how many people do we have on the VMT and is that sustainable? But I think that's something that we can tackle solutions to if we decide that we.
Makes sense, honestly. I was hesitant to even pose that idea when the VMT was an army of Jeremy. It's now an army of 3, I believe. You make an army of 5.
Technically, we've got like 6 people, but several of them aren't really that involved at this point, and we need to go through and kind of shrink that back down to the people who are currently active.
I would like to suggest possibly training course around this. Working at Red Hat and other big organizations, you probably have to take like a Title IX training course every year or broad course every year. And they usually have like a video of a mandatory training. And then you have to take like a quiz or some kind of survey that you have to check off. Say, yes, I've read it. I will comply. Maybe something a little more than just reading like a doc, a video.
As far as getting the project team leads or security liaisons to do things like upkeep on the core security review for their projects.
Well, I think part of the opportunity there is for the training is a refresher. Here's the process.
Right,
here's the
year.
requirements.
Right.
I don't know how we would be able to pull that off, but I like the idea a lot.
Very hard to take mandatory training when they work for you, let alone when you share a mailing list.
Turn off your Garrett access if you don't do this.
No good.
I welcome that.
Comment.
I do know from when we attempted is making one video for the Upstream Institute stuff. By the time we were even done recording it, it was a date. So making recordings is not as easy.
Unless you've got a team of people who do video production for a living, are constantly refreshing all of your catalog of video.
The interface changes like constantly.
We can start somewhere though, like define the process and we know what people have to do with within a project team. We could record a video, however bad it is. That's the start. We can
Because worse people might watch it.
production value and so more people. Yeah.
The upside to textual instructions is they can be
Really
pretty easily edited to keep them up to date with changes in interfaces. If you do embed a lot of screenshots or video walkthrough footage, that pretty much has to be redone anytime an interface changes. Any of the systems that were included in concert the video. So that's where we've fallen down a lot of times with those sorts of instructional materials, is just lack of enough people to redo screenshots, redo videos, all that. And then users get more confused when whatever's in the screenshot doesn't match what they're seeing on the screen that they're trying to do, so.
Because I think we like deleted Stacky Make Stack faced out of the system like 3 times. Making boardings. That's extra work on top of everything else because you want to use a demo user. We have Stacky Face, but you have to keep taking him out to recreate certain video shots. It becomes a back end issue, not just a front end issue, trying to get stuff done.
We only have a couple minutes left. Anything else for us to discuss or note?
Add your name if you haven't.
Sounds like there's some action items following discussion with TC, OpenStack. And then how that goes, we can rinse and repeat a little bit of the projects. Okay, cool. This is a great discussion. Thank you, everyone.